Welcome back to Growing Green Thumbs with Portland Nursery, where a novice and seasoned gardener come together to talk about all things plants. This week, I'll be talking with Katie about seed-saving techniques, but before I do that, Katie has her weekly USDA zone reminder for new and returning listeners.
That's right, Zone 8B, Pacific Northwest.
Easy peasy.
But this is a good subject because it basically correlates to any zone for the most part.
Oh, that's good.
So
something different.
Yeah, something for the East Coasters.
Did I ever tell you about the time I saved a seed? The first time I did?
No.
I've done it a few times, but it was like a couple years back, and I was waiting for the signal at a crosswalk when the seed kind of stepped up next to me wearing earbuds and was kind of playing on its phone or something like that. Not really paying attention at all, but it was about to step off the sidewalk without looking, so I was like, hey, seed, just wait a second. Saved it. You don't have to laugh.
I don't even know what to say to that, John, but...
Say thank you.
Thank you for saving that seed.
You're welcome. So I had to admit I have almost no experience with the type of seed saving you're going to be covering on the show today. So I guess let's start things off. I'm kind of curious about what types of seeds we're going to be talking about, and what are some of the benefits someone would expect to see if they wanted to try this out at home.
Right. So we're going to be talking about all kinds of seeds, probably primarily like veggies and different like herbaceous, like perennials and grasses and things like that. We won't get too much into like trees or anything. But yeah, a lot of this works for all seed saving. And, it's a good way to save money. It's sustainable. It can be really fun. Like once people start saving seeds, it's kind of addicting. Like it
becomes a thing.
It becomes a thing, like a habit, and they start like kind of like starting your own plants. They keep doing that.
Aren't there like seed saving clubs out there?
Oh,
people
probably. Yeah, I mean, in my like local neighborhood groups, like people are just constantly like, oh, I have extras of this. Do you want some? Mm-hmm. And it's really cool way to like connect with like your neighbors and stuff like that.
Are you pretty big into saving seeds?
I've done a lot of seed saving professionally with my background in like the National Park Service and conservation, where I've done a lot of native seed saving, where I'm basically like saving the like local genetics of wild plant seeds and using them for different restoration purposes. So most of my background's in that, and I occasionally save seeds from my garden. But I have been so busy experimenting with like different new varieties of stuff that like I don't
circle back around.
Yeah, eventually I'll get there, but I don't save a ton of seed.
So can you save seeds from any plant and expect them to germinate, or are there some that might be better than others to focus your time and energy on, especially if you're kind of new to it?
I mean, they'll grow, like your seeds will grow, but there's some that are a lot easier to start for a variety of different reasons. So some of the ones that I usually recommend, like some different veggie seeds are really easy, some different herbs and, like beans and peas are really easy to save. Many ornamental flowers, like I think of like marigolds or calendula are two that I save seeds from. You basically just go out there when the seeds are ready, pick them and, throw them in an envelope and put them in your garden.
What about like tomatoes?
Tomatoes are good. Yeah, tomatoes can be pretty straightforward too.
Okay.
And I'm kind of thinking of like all aspects of like, will it work out for the best, and like how easy it is to deal with the seeds, because you can't always necessarily just like take the seed and just like throw it in the ground. Like if you have this tomato full of seeds, it's just, you can't just put that in an envelope. You have a rotten tomato in an envelope.
Yeah, I've done that before.
Why are you putting tomatoes in envelopes?
I wanted to mail it to somebody. So one of my questions was actually kind of what makes some seeds easier to save than others.
Right. Yeah. So I'm just going to throw out like a few terms, and we're not going to get like super into them because we start to like descend into this like technical minefield. But basically there's open pollinated seeds, and a term a lot of folks hear is heirloom seeds and hybrids. So the open pollinated are seeds that are more genetically diverse. They can adapt to local they're adapted to local ecosystems. You can think of them as sort of like stabilized hybrids. Like you're gonna get what you plant for the most part. And with a hybrid seed, you might not necessarily get what you planted.
And you're talking about the heirlooms now, or are you talking?
I'm talking about I'm talking about hybrids now.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
And heirlooms are varieties of seed that are passed down from generation to generation. They're often open pollinated seeds. I think maybe all heirlooms are open pollinated. I'd have to fact check myself on that.
Okay.
But they're ensured that they're going to work and like their vitality is there, that you're going to get, that certain plant. A lot of things that are strictly hybrid seeds tend to be more in like big ag than like a home gardener. So some stuff like that, when you plant it, it might not actually turn into the plant that you expect it to be.
Okay.
So I don't want to get into it too much because we start to like wander into like some more in-depth territory.
Yeah. Was there a third type that you had mentioned too a second ago?
Of the open pollinated, the hybrid, and the heirloom.
Got it.
Yeah.
Perfect. So say you have a specific plant, like a green bean, and you've decided you want to try your hand at saving some of the seeds.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe you're not even sure exactly what you want to save,
Mm-hmm.
but you're ready to go out into the garden and look for some ideas.
Mm-hmm.
When is it kind of generally speaking a good time to harvest? I'm sure it can be plant specific.
Mm-hmm.
But once you have, how do you know if an individual seed is actually worth keeping?
Right. So definitely gonna back up there a second with what you've brought up about like when is a good time to harvest, and it is plant specific. It's also weather specific too. Some things might ripen faster if the season is going faster. So the best thing is to kind of scout out your garden or the area that you're collecting seeds from. You might miss it if you are just like, okay, mid-June is when I'm picking this seed. You might miss that seed window. So you constantly should be going out there and checking to see if they're ripe or not. Because it might come, if it's like a perennial in your garden or something like that, you might have seed that ripens at different points. Like once that flower head starts to dry up, you might get seed from that flower head. And it might hang on there, or maybe a bird will come and eat it, and then you won't have the seed that you wanted.
Yeah.
So scout out your garden and just kind of, as you're out there, keep an eye on things and get a sense of it. And then you were saying about the individual seeds, like if it's worth keeping or not. You certainly don't want to keep anything that's like bug eaten. There's a lot of insects out there that do eat seeds. So keeping that in mind, that if an insect, you can often see holes in the seeds. If an insect's gotten in that seed, it's
Can you tell by
probably
the coloration at all?
compromised. Yeah, there is a coloration, but for insects, sometimes it might be shriveled, like it might have gotten a lot of the juices sucked out of it or something like that, or it might not have even developed at all. So generally, you're looking for seeds that is hole free, doesn't have any holes or like marks on it, is plump. Generally, like a solid brown is a good rule of thumb. It's not necessarily the case. I highly recommend, and in all my work with like native seed, constantly just Googling images of what like a ripe seed looks like. For a lot of veggies, it's pretty straightforward, but, plump, brownish, it's a good sign.
Generally speaking.
Generally speaking, like a pea seed, for example, we eat the peas and they're green, right?
I do not eat the peas.
Okay, well, imagine that you ate peas.
Okay. I can picture it. It sounds terrible.
If you planted one of those like green peas that you can visualize, that would not grow. That is not a ripe seed.
Okay.
It's the immature fruit, if you will. So basically those seeds are going to be kind of like shriveled up, wrinkled things. I actually think pea seeds are white. But anyways, it's going to be a ways down the way.
Okay.
In order to use that.
So once you have some seeds that you think are going to be viable, and hopefully you've harvested them at the right time, do you just toss them in a bag and kind of forget about them, or how do you get ready to store them?
Right. Yeah. So there's a bunch of different steps that you generally want to take, depending on your kind of level that you want to get into with this. And depending on the type of seed, it's very seed specific. I've taught this as a full-fledged like in-person class before, and it was a lot of like, let's look at this individual seed and kind of like gauge what we're going to do with it. Because there's stuff like marigold seeds, you can just shove those in an envelope, but like we said, you can't just like shove a tomato in an envelope.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a whole bunch of different techniques And often a lot of seeds take up a lot of space, and they have a lot of casing around the outside, kind of like, like the pod that a bean or a pea is in. It's that sort of extra stuff, like the thing that the seed is in is called the chaff. And oftentimes that can, in storage in a bag or something, can mold and rot and break down. So you want to remove that? So you want to remove that for better storage.
Okay.
So, and that's a whole process in of itself.
Mostly just doing this by hand, or would you maybe want to recommend some equipment that people might want to have on standby?
Yeah, for like your home sort of seed saver, it could be something as simple as like, basically you want to break down that casing. Let's just do beans, for example, because that's a really easy visual for people. You have your ripe bean pods, and so you're like breaking those out of the pods. And what you can do is you can get like, say you had a sieve that bean seeds could fit through or whatever, and you can use a sieving system to kind of like sieve out like the little bits or the big bits. So then you just get the seed that you want, and you just kind of repeat that process
over and over
and over, depending on the seed type. Yeah, it can get really complex, and I've spent hours and hours, trying to break down, sorting out individual tiny seeds out of things.
So we might be jumping a little ahead here, but I guess we can ask it right now.
Sure.
So once you kind of get the chaff, is that what you said?
Chaff.
The chaff.
Chaff is like clothes rubbing up against you in weird ways.
That's true. We've all had it happen. So once you get the chaff away from the seed, you got the seed kind of hanging out by itself. What are some like good general storing tips at that point?
Yeah, you can definitely want to put them in like an envelope or something like that and store it in like a cool, dry place.
Plastic?
Sure. If that's
okay.
what you have,
it doesn't need to
fine.
Breathe a little bit?
No, if it's dry, it's dry, and you want to keep it dry. If your seeds aren't quite dry yet, you can sort of keep them. What I used to do when I ran this like native seed lab was I would put it in a brown paper bag and like hang it up on a little clothesline with a clip and just let it like dry out a little bit more before I stored it.
So that's absolutely key though.
To make sure it's dry. Yeah. Otherwise it can lead to molding issues. Yeah. And I've seen people like store seed in their refrigerator, and it's a very kind of moist environment.
Can be, yeah.
Yeah. So one thing people sometimes do is put silica gel packets, like comes in like shoes and stuff like that.
Yeah. I have a whole collection of them.
Oh yeah. Just,
yeah.
Of course you would. But you can just like throw a couple packets of that like in the box that you're keeping your seeds, and that'll absorb any moisture.
Okay.
But yeah, like a cool, dry place will help it last longer.
And again, generally speaking, about how long can you expect the seeds to kind of hang around for?
Ooh, that is also, I feel like my answer for most of this is like it's seed specific, but it is, I would say a good couple of years probably, but as more time goes on, the vitality of that seed will go down because it's like it's storing the energy to create
just
a
waiting
new
to
plant.
Do its thing.
Yeah, so eventually it's not going to be able to do that, and it's going to, not last. But some seed types can last for a long time.
So going back now again, you were touching upon, we've been talking a lot about veggies and some maybe easier veggies to store. Do you think that all veggie seeds are easy to save?
No, you definitely, like I was kind of touching on before, you get into a lot of that sort of gray territory with like the different hybrid types and how they don't necessarily come out true at all. So you want to kind of steer away from a lot of different veggie seeds potentially because they're a little bit more difficult. So just looking up like what you're most interested in and seeing like how straightforward that is, or if it's something that you have to like keep your patch of lettuce like separate from your other patch of lettuce, or you'll get like some mutant lettuce that you weren't expecting.
Some people might be down for that.
Yeah, I mean, it might not taste super good, and things like carrots can take a couple years to get seed from. So
do a lot of people
something
grow
to keep
carrots
in
from
mind.
seed?
Grow carrots from seed?
Yeah.
Yeah, I grow carrots from seed. Not a lot of people save seed from carrots.
Oh, okay.
But think of like garlic. Like a lot of people will grow their own garlic, and that like head of garlic is the seed of the plant.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people will set some aside and save it for, planting in the fall. So I imagine a lot of gardeners listening who grow their own garlic are seed savers. Technically seed savers.
You mentioned this a moment ago when you said seeds won't come true, and you kind of noted something similar earlier on in the show. So are you saying, when you say they won't come true, are you saying that the seed you've harvested from a specific plant might not produce the exact same plant? And I'm kind of thinking of like apples here.
Right. Yeah. Because, of course, and that's a question we get at the nursery a lot is like, I have this apple seed. Is it going to work? Sure, it's going to work. It's going to grow into something. But it's, especially with apple seeds, it's not going to be the true variety necessarily.
Did you know that Johnny Appleseed was a real person?
I did.
Didn't.
I did. There's this
What?
book,
How
Botany.
did I not know that?
I don't know. Did you read The Botany of Desire by Michael Pollan?
No, I was just reading something the other day, and I was like, Johnny Appleseed was a real person?
Yeah, you should check out this book. Apparently, he was an entrepreneur. And do you know why he planted orchards? We're deviating a bit.
Somebody mentioned to me that because the seeds weren't necessarily true, they didn't necessarily taste good, so he was making a lot of like hard cider at the time, but I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, they were doing hard cider because back in the day the water wasn't safe to drink, so people would drink hard cider. So he would go out and plant these orchards as an entrepreneur to get people to go develop those areas into like villages.
I'd be down for that.
Yeah, you should check out this book. It's got a whole section on it.
I don't read. I do sometimes. So you got apple seeds, but maybe not the best thing to grow from seed. What about other, fruit seeds or even stone fruit?
Well, one thing you have to keep in mind with a lot of fruit trees is that often they are grafted onto different root stocks.
Oh, yeah.
So then that's a whole other ball game if you're wanting to do that. So you might plant something and it might get to be way more ginormous because typically something is on, if it's a dwarf plant, it's probably on a dwarfing root stock. So that's something to keep in mind. But, if you got a big cherry tree and you plant that seed, you might get that same cherry tree, possibly.
Do you feel that fruit seeds, generally speaking, are something that the novice might not want to kind of go after right away?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, tree seeds take a long time to like grow into anything, so it's kind of like the long game.
And this kind of goes into my next question for you, actually.
Ooh.
So I can picture a lot of listeners wanting to go out and save seeds from their veggies and herb gardens, or maybe some small fruit seed, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
But is it possible to save seeds from other trees or shrubs or even grasses? And if so, is that something that would actually be beneficial for your average Portland gardener who maybe has like a standard size lot, let's say, to actually go out and do?
I mean, sure. If you want, like, kind of going back to our bonsai episode, I know a lot of people will grow little trees in containers and start them really young. So they'll do that from seed. But, if you want a big shade tree for your yard, starting an oak from seed is going to take a hot minute.
Yeah. Yep.
So, for your for a tree, it's more difficult. A lot of shrubs are often grown from cuttings because it's a little bit faster. But you could certainly grow a lot of shrubs from cuttings. And grasses, a lot of grasses are really easy to grow from seed and will kind of self-seed a lot in your garden. That's kind of like my technique, is the like sort of laid back gardener where I just let my garden seed as it wills and then I like move those plants later.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of that stuff, a lot of grasses are pretty easy to start from seed.
I was going to say, I would imagine grasses would be a little more worth your time, perhaps.
Well, if you're trying to, have like a row of grasses or whatever, and it might take a few seasons for it to grow into a sizable plant. Like I planted some grass seeds of this kind of grass that I love last year, and it's still in a 4-inch pot right now. So it's still a little baby. So hopefully in a couple more years, it'll actually look like a sizable plant.
Are there companies out there that don't legally want to let you use your seed?
You run into that with a lot of like the hybrid stuff. And yeah, I'd say for the home grower, you don't really run into that. It's more of like a big ag issue.
So I know we're going to be running short on time here, but I do want to check in with you about seed storage. I think we kind of already really touched base on that. I wasn't sure if there was anything else you wanted to kind of bring up.
I think we covered it pretty well. I think we covered it pretty well.
Have you ever heard of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault?
I haven't heard of that one, no. But I have heard of the Millennium Seed Bank at Kew Gardens. Have you?
No.
I think they're very...
We should have shared this information with each other beforehand.
No, now it's this nice surprise.
We'll change notes.
Yeah, right. Well, mine just says Millennium Seed Bank.
Okay.
But I think they're very similar. It's like a global sort of... yours, I think...
Cachet.
To like protect the genetic diversity.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I think relatively close to the North Pole. I don't know too much about it. I was just kind of reading more about it in preparation for the interview, but it's pretty impressive. And you can actually hop on YouTube and see some tours from inside of it, which is pretty neat too.
Yeah, I think yours is more like crop diversity and mine's like different native plants from all over the world. I actually collected seeds for the Millennium Seed Bank. It was my first job out of college.
Did they fire you?
No, it was.
You did a good job.
It was. Yeah, I did a great job. It was an internship, and we collected grass seed actually, and then put some of it in storage at the Millennium Seed Bank.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I assume that's where it went. That's where they said it was
going to go.
Yeah,
it's probably on Mars.
Yeah.
So we're almost at the end here. Do you have any more tips or tricks you'd like to share with everybody?
Yeah, there's a few other things I wanted to mention. So one thing to keep in mind is, especially in the Pacific Northwest, don't collect after it rains or after you water your garden and you get the plants wet. That can lead to molding issues if you're bringing in this like bag of already wet plants. If there's something like a lupin or something that drops its seed really quickly, you can do a trick where you can staple small paper bags around the flower head as it's going into seed and getting closer. And then you can collect it before it drops. If you have seed that might have a lot of bugs in it, you could throw it in the freezer and overnight, and that'll kill the bugs.
Okay.
And then you can go from there. And then just like keep experimenting and testing things as you go through with like cleaning your seed. It's kind of a visual process, so I would recommend going online and looking up some videos.
Maybe take some notes or two along the way.
Yeah.
Reference in the future.
Learn the difference between chaff and chafe.
Yeah. All right, Katie. I think that's pretty much it, right?
Yeah, that's all I really had to talk about.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you for that information. Many thanks to TalkCast PDX for producing Growing Green Thumbs with Portland Nursery, and thank you all for listening as well. Terry Burdett is going to be on the show next week to share some garden design tips with us. Terry is Portland Nursery's in-house landscape designer and oversees the custom planting plans at the nursery.
Nice.
Please remember, while Katie is here answering all of my plant questions, Portland Nursery is always available to answer all of your plant questions. Visit us here today in Portland, Oregon at 50th and Stark, 90th and Division, or check out portlandnursery.com, and we'll talk to you next week.
Bye, John.
See you, Katie.
Life is just one long hangover.